You may be one of those guys who saw the cute posters, were fooled by the cute marketing and trailers that the staff didn't include this guy's name on to fool people, and unfortunately you didn't pick up the leak about Urobucher's involvement in it, and went in blind not knowing that it's written by a literal psychopath, so you recommended it to your niece not knowing that it's going to be the worst mistake of your life, and gave it a 1-star review after you found out that it was the worst mistake of your life. Yeah, the funniest thing about this completely comedic happy-go-lucky adventure, which all the shit they show you in the opening definitely happens in it, is that it doesn't stop lying to the viewer. From how the show's art style is in total contrast with the plot and the characters, from how the only characters in it who never kill another magical girl are the ones who literally wanted to kill each other their first time meeting, to how much fun the plot twist about Homura being the real protagonist was. This story just never stops lying to you. I mean, Urobucher literally makes fun of the audience via QA about how they don't understand the characters and all. And that's the point. It's about how humanity never understood the contradictions it's based on, or how it tries to justify its happiness and prosperity with lies about consent, necessity and whatnot, and never acknowledges that what all of us are trapped in is just a never-ending cycle of lies and contradictions based on more lies and contradictions on top of even more lies and contradictions. A normal girl who dreams of something bigger than herself. A romanticist trying to make her ideals become reality. A lonely woman hidden behind her talent and power. A child trying to cope with her past mistakes. A creature unable to understand what it's meddling with, all connected to the devil. The show starts with a typical dream. Our unassuming lead in a hopeless situation, presented with a chance to make things right. We see afloat buildings, a lone hero trying to fight evil, ready to risk everything while we hear this eerie music. But we are met with words of hope, a promise that this destruction can be prevented with a simple contract to save all that seems lost. A dream that seemed dark ends with hope. The audience wants this ending. It wishes for this conclusion. It yearns for it at any cost, and we are led to believe that it's right. The show has this cutesy happy-go-lucky art style, a cute cat / whatever mascot. Even the ending is cute and happy, and that's why when you see the character the show was building up as a mentor figure get decapitated, you're in shock. You are betrayed by your expectations and preconceptions. You are made fun of because of hoping for light, and you are trolled for believing that this event would not happen even though you were warned about it beforehand. Just like the starting scene, you are met with a situation where all seems lost. The first time you see this scene is a shock for you. The second time you see this scene is purely a shock for the characters. But at the end, you are met with hope yet again. Kyubey and Homura both tell the characters and the audience that they are in no position to either judge or decide about magical girls' lifestyle, because the only ones who have this right are the fellow magical girls like themselves. We are led to believe that there is this community of heroes with the same altruistic ideals, and that the gloomy, mysterious transfer student is just an anomaly, an exception. We are wrong again. What we believe to be being a part of a greater whole, which strives for bettering the world, turns out to be an illusion. Different people have different ideologies, even though they are practically doing the same thing. And even if they aren't ideologically incompatible, their relationship is still one of rivalry that can even result in the potential death of magical girls. We are tricked once again. Fast forward more and you can see even more lies being revealed. In episodes 6 and 7, we see that Kyubey isn't a cute mascot, but far from it. He is an eldritch abomination who we can't understand, and vice versa, that is disguised in a cloak of innocence. Even if we know his reasoning and logic, we don't understand it. In episode 10, we get Homura's backstory and two other lies are revealed. First one being that the pink-haired girl who lacked self-worth and self-confidence isn't the protagonist, and that the gloomy, mysterious transfer student was the real protagonist all along. A point which is even more confirmed by Rebellion. Madoka Magica isn't the story of Madoka. It's the story of magical girls. And Homura is the one who has the deepest understanding of magical girls, and she is the conduit we can explore the world with. The second lie that is revealed to us is what we start the story with, this time from Homura's perspective, and what she sees is nothing. The first time we see this event, we feel an urge to prevent it, because what other reason do we need for wanting to make the wrongs right? But the second time we see it, it's just empty. At this point, we have seen so many atrocities that this just feels like another one of those. Heroes turn villain, pure hearts being taken advantage of, systematic corruption and abuse. What are we supposed to want now? Make all the wrongs that have happened until now right? Enter Madoka Kaname. While kind, naive, and lacking of self-worth to a highly dangerous degree, Madoka is the conduit to understand the normal world better. Between all the characters we see in the show, she is one of the only few people who doesn't have her life turned to hell. She doesn't suffer from the loneliness and regret Mommy has over her life and wish. She is not cursed with a deep understanding of an even more cursed world to make her commit acts of self-destruction. She also doesn't suffer from the trauma Kyoko and Homura are trying to cope with. She has a loving family, a role model to look up to. Her parents have a perfectly healthy relationship. She is the closest you can get to a happy normal life. And yet, Madoka feels both responsible and unworthy of the happiness she has because of her lack of self-worth and survivor's guilt. After Mommy dies, she and Sayaka try to comfort each other, knowing that they have witnessed something that will haunt them all their life. And they feel responsible and guilty for not being firm about contracting Kyubey and becoming a magical girl. They feel guilty as if it's something expected of them, and that they are somehow making a mistake and are bad people as a result for not wanting to die the most horrible death of all, in a way that their own family even wouldn't understand why it happened. This mindset is even more explicitly confirmed before Sayaka comes to save Madoka in episode 4 from the witch, where Madoka thinks that being trapped in the witch labyrinth is somehow a punishment for fearing to become a magical girl. In Madoka Magica, the world doesn't view the girl's contracts as a generous act, but as an expected self-sacrifice, just like the scene where two nurses are talking about Sayaka's visits to Kyosuke, as if the characters are somehow obligated to set themselves on fire only for others to stay warm, and it explicitly tells you that there is no virtue and nobility in such an act whatsoever. True selflessness and sacrifice are just a recipe for disaster, and only if such a thing even exists. Sayaka's arc is one of questioning the very concept of selflessness, and whether or not human beings are even able to act quote-unquote selflessly if it doesn't concern them in some way, and if they are, is it even a good thing? Sayaka has as much doubts about becoming a magical girl as Madoka has. She even questions that is she even worthy of being granted a miracle when there are people who supposedly need a miracle even more than her, regardless of the question of whether or not a miracle even has any value, something that she gets warned about from Mommy Tomoe. Sayaka has her own wishes and desires, but feels like it's expected of her to set them aside for others. fighting for other people's sake even when she not only doesn't benefit from it in any way, but even suffers as a result. And her poor understanding of her desires make her situation even worse. Sayaka genuinely wishes for Kyosuke to be able to use violin once again, but the reasons for it and the expectations she has for granting him his wish are complicated. She at first believes that fighting for other people is a noble action, deifying mommy in the process, believing that all magical girls are selfish just like Homura and Kyoko. She believes that their actions are unethical and that letting people die so that they can get their hands on more grief seeds is indicative of a corrupt system, not yet knowing that the system's origins lie elsewhere.
それ違うよ。あの転校生も昨日の京子ってやつと同類なんだ。自分の都合しか考えてない。
Sayaka is slightly self-righteous in this scene, blaming Kyoko for her cold demeanor and selfish actions, which causes her to spiral down even more into the hellhole of altruism and heroism, trying to make her ideals come true with no concern about what might happen to herself, only a desire to protect those she loves and those who she deems innocent, believing that the world deserves protection from the likes of her. Too bad that she's going to be proven wrong in all of those cases. Let's get back to Madoka for a moment. Still suffering from her survival's guilt and lack of self-worth, she encounters another problem. The fact that her best friend is now in the danger of being killed at any moment, and she can't do anything to help her unless she becomes another sacrificial lamb in the incubator's utilitarianistic system. The exact same result Homura is breaking every bone in her body to prevent. Madoka feels responsible to accompany Sayaka in her sacrifice, believing that she too needs to save other people and take the mantle. But Homura and even Sayaka assure her that she shouldn't feel responsible. Homura especially admonishes Madoka for her feelings and thoughts, telling her that she should not confuse gratitude with responsibility, while Sayaka accepts her new role in the world so that others don't have to. And even Kyoko later warns Madoka that it would be an insulting decision for her to make a contract with no good reason in mind. Madoka still strives to find a meaning in her supposedly meaningless and useless existence. All the while when Homura continues fighting to keep and fulfill the promise she made with the same girl who is desperately trying to get herself killed right now, only to cheaply achieve that small but desirable sense of worth with a tempting easy cheat code, ultimately culminating in her messiah complex and ending decisions that caused the world to be rewritten. While Sayaka accepts the role that the world has handed her and expects from her, Kyoko is everything Sayaka isn't. She is selfish, cold, pragmatic, and in Sayaka's eyes, an evil person who is only after her own benefits and gain. Of course, not knowing about Kyoko's regrets and worldview, it's easy to come to that conclusion. Born into a poor religious family and receiving an idealistic worldview, just like her father, Kyoko accepts Kyubei's contract to help her father's ideals be accepted by other people, believing this to be a noble act where she fights the witches directly and her father helps people in their everyday life, both making the world a better place. This is even further explored in the spin-off manga The Different Story, which shows how Momi and Kyoko got separated and shows the events that shaped Kyoko's new worldview with detail. That's why when Kyoko sees Sayaka, she's looking at her dead mentor and even her past self. While Sayaka believes Kyoko to be a selfish pragmatist, Kyoko believes Sayaka to be a short-sighted and single-minded idealist, not understanding her own wishes and desires, denying them with her actions, and not understanding the problems her quote-unquote selfless sacrifice for others is able to cause and will inevitably cause. After the reveal about a magical girl's soul being placed inside their soul gem, Sayaka is the only magical girl who is actually affected by this revelation, where Kyoko comes in and talks to her, trying to make her understand that for every good thing she does, she causes equal harm as well, both to herself, the people close to her, and even unrelated people. Kyoko talks about how her own single-minded actions for others costed her own family's happiness, and that just because you think you're doing a good thing, that doesn't mean the people you love are either agree with you or think you're in the right. Far from it, when your actions not only can cost your own life, but can also drive the ones you tried to save in the first place down the spiral of nihilism, where they wonder if what they believed in even had any value to begin with. No matter the evil committed, it will benefit someone somewhere, just as no matter how good an action might be, it will harm someone somewhere. And who are the likes of Cube to say that their suffering have less value than the happiness of those who laugh at the top of other people's corpses? Sayaka not only had ignored the fact that her life is just as dear to her family and friends as the ones who she saves, she also had forgotten that her life isn't just her own to do whatever she wants with. People are responsible for those who they have made attached to themselves, and as much as she doesn't want nor allows them to trespass their boundaries, they too feel the same. And Kyoko's tragedy shows that it's just one of the many kind of outcomes that can happen as a result of Sayaka's actions. Sayaka points out that Kyoko's words don't add up, saying that if she believes you should only live for yourself, then why she is concerned about her, something that can mistakenly be interpreted as a case supporting Sayaka's worldview. And yes, I said mistakenly, and I will elaborate on it further down the video. Kyoko's decision to talk to Sayaka was a purely selfish action. She didn't do that for any other reason than to find closure because of what she did to her family and to be able to cope with her regrets. She did it because she sees herself in Sayaka. Helping Sayaka for now is just a means to an end, to reach her own selfish emotional closure. Nothing more, nothing less. Sayaka, rejecting Kyoko's offer, begins to understand her viewpoint and actions, coming to the conclusion that not being agree with her doesn't necessarily mean hating her. Her actions symbolized in her rejection of Kyoko's offered apple. Not knowing where it came from, she rejects it and says she wouldn't regret what she has done, while Kyoko eats the apple, symbolizing that she is still firm in her beliefs and worldview. While Sayaka still believes that the price she paid wasn't high, she comes to understand what she said wasn't true in the same day. Sayaka not only forgets the hypocrisy of her ideals, as it seems for whatever stupid and illogical reason, heroes are often exceptions to their own rules. It's okay to let yourself get miserable and suffer, but if it's someone else, then it's evil, as if you're less worthy of the same happiness. Not having the answer to who the hell decided such a thing, they continue fighting for what they don't even understand, ignoring themselves and in more extreme cases a certain minority to continue playing the hero. It's not about more harm coming from this farce than good, it's about how they claim to be just, have no other choice, that their actions are justified, or a combination of these and other factors, while failing to see their own hypocrisy and don't even take responsibility for it. In the scene where Sayaka tells Madoka about Hitomi, she starts to feel even more disgusted of herself. She says she is already dead. It's not only a reference to the state of her body, but also what she is doing. How long will she live? How can she make Kyosuke get dependent on her if she might die just tomorrow? What would become of those who she loves? Unlike what she expects, not any kind of clear-cut answer presents itself. Dissociating from her pain and physical body, she tries to ignore how miserable she has gotten. Stoicism, hand in hand with heroism, you might call it. But no matter how selfless someone might be, for every sacrifice there are expectations. No one gives without first demanding. Those who think they don't want anything in return either have forgotten it, just trying to fool themselves, or both. There is no effect without a cause, and there is no gain without first giving. Sayaka starts to feel as if Madoka and the whole world owe her something, owe her for her suffering, and she can't stop that feeling. Because Madoka can fight too, then she has to fight like me. Because I suffered to protect this world, then it owes me to be a good place, full of justice with my standards. The instant a sacrificial lamb's expectations aren't met, they snap. It was the case with Kyoko, it was the case with Sayaka, and it was the case with Madoka as well. Sayaka wholeheartedly was willing to fight for others, but in return she had expectations. She not only didn't understand her own desires very well, actively ignored them, tried to form an intimate relationship with another person before having a stable one with herself, believed that using her power for herself is evil, thought the world owes her and needs to be worth her suffering, and more. She finally loses herself when she understands how foolish she was. It is ingrained in our brains that everything has a cost. That's why we try to justify sacrifice in the first place. So why do we ignore that even sacrifice has a cost? Why we try to convince ourselves that there really are people who would bear our burden without wanting anything in return? If cost is evil, then all cost is evil. Those who don't understand it are just those who don't have the ability to process morality and human psychology. It is an endless cycle of cause and effect, ultimately resulting in tragedy. You reap what you sow, after all. We just want to believe that this cycle would end with a certain action or a quote-unquote necessary sacrifice. It doesn't. The first drop of blood needs to be shed and the cycle never ends. Infinity starts the instant just one is lost. Now let us look at the player in the back seat, the one who after Sayaka's death finally comes to the main stage. Kyubei. Sayaka understands her mistakes at the end of her life, that not only she didn't have enough understanding of what she was fighting for and fails to come up with an answer to whether or not the world is worthy of protecting, she also understands that for every person she saves, equal harm is done, maybe even more. She finally understands that she is not a hero if her actions are also causing pain too. She understands Kyubei. She understands the system at that moment. Kyubei is what you get if you were to take the trolley problem and completely ignore the fact that it doesn't have an answer. Not a correct answer, mind you, but just an answer. It's a dilemma which tackles both psychology and philosophy at the same time, and is one that inherently can't be answered. You can't win a broken game after all. Kyubei always takes the majority side. If you found yourself unable to understand his viewpoint, that's completely natural. Because most of the time when someone is doing what he does for quote-unquote the greater good, they are usually referring to humanity as a whole and the majority. Here, the humanity isn't the greater good. It's the universe and its inhabitants. Something that we don't care about and can't even be bothered with, far less comprehend it. Because we think it's none of our concern. Yet whenever humanity is at stake, we go towards the greater good excuse to cope with the situation. This contradiction is pointed out by Kyubei as well. When we use cattle, we don't care about them. Yet we somehow think that other creatures view us differently, that the others view us differently, because of the least amount of similarities we share. 2 legs, 2 eyes, 2 hands, 1 nose, so on and so forth. We are only concerned about it when it benefits us. It's a farce. When we don't get what we want due to our own ignorance, we blame others. Is Kyubei innocent in the matter? Absolutely not. But are we not to blame for many things as well? We are. Kyubei is a trolley problem given a utilitarianistic answer. The difference is that the lone person on the other train rail isn't a random person, or even someone we know or love. It's what we believe to be the greater good itself all along, so most of us reject it, because it doesn't leave room for our fantasies of necessary evil, justified sin, beautiful and noble sacrifice. It doesn't let you to lose yourself in the delusion that your death, your selflessness, your quote-unquote necessary actions have meaning, because it isn't benefiting what we thought was the greater good. Kyubei again points out how irresponsible and illogical such wishes are.
彼女たちを裏切ったのは僕たちではなく、むしろ自分自身の祈りだよ。どんな希望もそれが条理にそぐわないものである限り、必ず何らかの歪みを生み出すことになる。やがてそこから最悪が生じるのは当然の説になる。
Remember what Madoka's mother's advice was? Just because you always do the right thing, that doesn't mean you'll get a happy ending. And that for as much good as Sayaka does, someone needs to do wrong in her place. And this is the result.
やめて。どういうことだおい。こいつ死んでるじゃねえかよ。
Evil shall be repaid. We want to convince ourselves that good would come from our actions, so we call them just and good, ignoring those that we harm, and even if we accept the nature of our actions, we still hope for it to result in our desired conclusion. Kyubei believes that good would come from utilitarianism, that the humanity's prosperity is based on all those tears and blood which were shed, and he is partially correct. Correct about humanity's evolution and improvement coming from those tears and blood. Correct that the current state of humanity is based on top of a mountain of corpses. Wrong about it being a good conclusion. Just as once the witches said, fair is foul and foul is fair, hover through the dark and filthy air. Foul fairness and fair foul. But if foul is fair and fair is foul, isn't the foul that was fair foul again? It creates an endless cycle, where that which is fair is foul and that which is foul fair. What effects does such a development have on people? How such a society, such a system would operate? It would be just a false mirage of a civilization, something that just disappears when you get close to it. Is there even any value to such types of illusions? Madoka, even fully knowing the incubator's intentions, still plays by their rules, because she doesn't think the magical girl's sacrifice is a bad thing. She just thinks the fact that their sacrifices are in vain is cruel and wrong. They sell their souls for a small compensation, lose their humanity, never experience joy again, and ultimately cause as much despair and destruction as they prevented. Madoka tries to give their sacrifices meaning, give them the chance to rest after all is done. Sacrifice is meaningless, so what if she makes it meaningful? Doesn't that solve the problem? At first, it appears that it does. The world is supposedly a better place when the magical girls don't become witches, and even Homura seems to accept Madoka's decisions and the new world she has created. Madoka's sacrifice, unlike all the previous ones, is one done with full knowledge of the circumstances and partially the consequences. She knows what the witches are, she knows that she would be erased from the world, she knows the conditions, basically, she consents to it. So, what if she has consented to it? Does that make it right? What remains at the end of the world, where causality is broken and meaning of life is lost? What remains at the intersection where a meaningless life and a meaningful death overlap? A normal girl who dreams of something bigger than herself. A romanticist trying to make her ideals become reality. A lonely woman hidden behind her talent and power. A child trying to cope with her past mistakes. A creature unable to understand what it's meddling with. All connected to the devil.
Once, the Lord of Light banished dark and all that stemmed from humanity, and men assumed a fleeting form. These are the roots of our world. Men are props in state of life, and no matter how tender, how exquisite, a lie will remain a lie.
Some thought rebellion ruined Madoka Magica, but if rebellion didn't exist, it would practically be pissing on the whole show's themes. Do you really think Madoka's actions would have had such perfectly positive implications? such positive consequences, Madoka, even while still having the desire to leave, decided to single-mindedly do what she was warned not to numerous times. The scene where Mommy and Kyoko congratulate her for her wish. What if it's just an illusion in Madoka's head, trying to convince herself that her farce and hypocritical actions are right? Kyoko and Mommy are dead, and Madoka hasn't become a god yet. How can we know that it's not an illusion? Like many other things in this show, it is left open to interpretation. Did Sayaka kill the men at the train or not? Did the world go to ruin in the ending? Did Madoka do the right thing? Rebellion asks whether there is value to illusions, those which are not genuine, unreal illusions, false ones, lack of self-worth, blind idealism, loneliness, trauma. Between the story's main characters, two of them weren't genuine in what they did. Sayaka fought because she thought she had to, because she's obligated to, because saving others is the quote-unquote right thing to do. Madoka fought because it was the good thing, because she would be worthless without it, because she wouldn't have a sense of self if she doesn't. And who is she if she is not a magical girl? Mommy is in the middle. She has no one in her life. She contracted Kyubey to stay alive in the first place. She is kind and has her own ideals, but also genuinely wants to not be alone anymore, selfishly bringing Sayaka and Madoka with her in the witch hunts to sell the idea of becoming the magical girl. Homura and Kyoko are the ones who do what they do genuinely, even if what they do is deemed selfish by others. Some might think Kyoko learned to be quote-unquote selfless during the show's events, but I don't see it that way. Yes, Kyoko keeps Sayaka's body fresh at the expense of her magical energy, but that is also a selfish action for herself. You can hardly call someone who literally triggers her own death when she knows a whole city might be destroyed if she doesn't live to fight the Valkyrie's Knight selfless and having the slightest bit of care for others. There were countless options in front of Kyoko which wouldn't have resulted in her death at all, including killing Sayaka after recovery or even more options. Yet she chooses to kill herself right then and there. Her interest and love for Sayaka is one born from inwards, not outwards. At first, she might have just wanted to prevent seeing another tragedy like her own, finding closure in preventing Sayaka's misery, and proving to herself that her own tragedy could have been prevented if she wasn't blinded by her ideals and power. And all of the above slowly grew into a genuine relationship and care out of knowledge by coming to know Sayaka. Kyoko forgot that the reason her family fell was not because she wanted them to be happy. Wanting the people you love to be happy can't be labeled as selfish or selfless. Her mistake was taking the easy way out, striving to get her desired conclusion by her contract with Kyubey. Kyoko slowly started to want to prove that Sayaka's care for her loved ones could result in happiness if done right, that she herself could be happy, and she stayed aware of her past mistakes all along. Character development isn't fucking up your character's entire personality and turning the character into an entire new one. It's letting the character naturally grow with their core still intact. Making Kyoko quote-unquote selfless again would be undoing the development she had in her backstory, further explored in the different stories manga. Madoka also committed Kyoko's mistake. Whether the scene with Mommy and Kyoko was an illusion or not is up to interpretation. But Madoka still bribed her way out to achieve a sense of purpose, the self-worth, and the self she lacked. It's far easier to accept the role you're handed and just go with it. Abandonment is easy, sacrifice is easy, but protecting, striving, that needs a firm resolve. Homura at first thinks this imaginary world is a disrespect to Madoka's sacrifice, believing that she should strive to protect the world Madoka has created. But we know that this is a facade. We know of her promise. We know of her oath. She might have forgotten it, but we haven't.
約束するわ。絶対にあなたを救ってみせる。何度繰り返すことになっても、必ずあなたを守ってみせる。
Homura goes to even further lengths to protect Madoka's new world, attempting to figure out the mysteries behind this world, even though this new life hasn't harmed any of them. Something which a now fully grown Sayaka addresses.
それを祈った心は裁かれなきゃならないほど罪深いものなの？
At this point, all the characters have come to their final stage. Sayaka finally understands and sorts out her feelings about Hitomi and Kyosuke. Kyoko has regained what she had lost. Madoka found meaning in her life. Mommy is no longer alone, and Homura grows to understand that she doesn't want this. At first, she fights with it, despairing over her own failure to save Madoka and inability to accept Madoka's new world. Madoka's confession at the garden once again reminds Homura, and by extension us, that no one truly wants to be separated from those who they love. No one is really willing to do so. Homura understands that she shouldn't have let Madoka sacrifice herself no matter what, but it was too late, or she thought so. At first, she tried to protect Madoka's world, believing that she should repent for her failures, killing Madoka before she becomes a witch, killing others, failing to keep her promise. She thought that she can only atone for her mistakes by dying. She was wrong. She could change things by accepting that she can't accept this situation, this system. This world that Madoka has created wasn't one that she could be happy in. It was a world based on top of Madoka's corpse, a disgusting stench emitting from every corner of it. Just as once she had abandoned a world where Madoka wasn't there anymore, she once again abandons the world where Madoka became the cornerstone of. Whether Madoka is trying to destroy the world as a witch or save it as a god, it doesn't matter to Homura. It's not her battlefield. Waking up from the slumber of deception, she casts aside the facade she was hiding behind. Deep down, she only wanted two things: for Madoka to be happy and for herself to be with Madoka. But after Madoka's sacrifice, she had an internal conflict, one where Madoka might have been happy, but she wasn't with her. She herself wasn't happy. She was in heaven. Everything should have been better than the previous world. Magical Girl's sacrifices and wishes weren't in vain. It should have been heaven, but it wasn't. Homura was suffering in this new heaven of Madoka. She was suffering in heaven, and she came to a conclusion: better to delight in hell than to suffer in heaven. No one could understand Homura, but she didn't care. She didn't need it. She witnessed the world's foulness sooner than anyone, more than anyone. She witnessed the incubator's failures and evil time and time again. Even after Madoka's sacrifice, they didn't leave her be, trying to even ravage her lifeless corpse. The incubators are not the devil, they are us, the humanity. Incomprehensible, full of hypocrisy, but yet knowing it better than anyone. Liars, deceiving others for their own goals, making excuses for their actions, babbling about the greater good and evolution. Change the incubator's design and portrayal a bit, and you have what we humans have been doing for centuries. There is no meaning in death. There is no meaning in sacrifice. And even the God's power couldn't change that. For there to be meaning in death, then life needs to be meaningless. Death is the absence of life, the absence of what was there before. So life and death can't have meaning at the same time. For there to be meaning in life, death needs to be meaningless, and vice versa. The same applies to sacrifice too. For sacrifice to have meaning, that which is sacrificed should be meaningless. That's exactly what happened to Homura. Her wishes, which she denies herself of, her desire for Madoka to be happy and to be with her, everything she might do, anything she might protect, and her whole life is meaningless after Madoka's sacrifice. Homura's own sacrifice by trying to protect this world, which she doesn't care about and most likely even hates, might have meaning because she herself is meaningless now. She is fighting for something she doesn't care about, protecting something she hates, living a disgusting life she loathes. By trying to give sacrifice meaning, Madoka took away the meaning of what gets lost. In this world where all is lost, no one knows the value of lost things. people's lives and dreams, all are meaningless now, and the world is full of illusions and hypocrisy. Madoka couldn't accept that only tragedy could come from tragedy. She wanted it to end, so she tried to right something that wasn't wrong in the first place. People can't save others. Sayaka calls Homura a devil and swears that she would never forget that. But she is reminded of the meaning in her life in just a few seconds. Our smiles, our happiness, our desires, our lives, all are meaningful. We can't expect good to come from losing them. We can't expect to be able to bear a miserable life. We shouldn't deceive ourselves or try to pretend that a tragedy has meaning. We shouldn't try to call a sacrifice noble or necessary. One drop of blood being shed and a cycle is created. The snake eats its own tail for all eternity. No end in sight, no good comes from it. Homura accepts all of it, accepts herself, her desires, and her happiness, and makes the incubators, makes us, the audience, the humanity, to understand that we were meddling with what we didn't comprehend. Why was Homura so hell-bent on finding the witch? Wasn't she happy? What would she do if she had found who the witch was? At the end of the story, maybe even she herself doesn't remember the lies she told herself. No one remembers those lies anymore. Sayaka grew to accept her own wishes and desires, to accept her witch form, which symbolized all that the world and she herself feared. Kyoko confronted her past trauma, accepted her mistakes, finally succeeded to form a genuine relationship. Mommy also goes past her past trauma and accepts her mistakes, ultimately achieving what she always wanted. She is no longer alone. Madoka is finally safe from the incubator's machinations, happy with those she loves, those who she might have never seen again were it not for Homura. She doesn't need to think about the bigger hole she wished for anymore. And Homura, finally able to fulfill her promise, now happy, dancing below the halved moon, atop the corpse that should have been laid there long ago. Is Madoka Magica exploring self-destruction that is disguised as altruism? Or is it questioning the self-destruction that is altruism? Are human beings even able to do quote-unquote selfless acts? Or is it a lie we tell ourselves because of our lack of self-worth? Is there even any good and virtue in what we call sacrifice? Madoka Magica doesn't answer them because it's not supposed to. It doesn't send you off with an explicit message or adage, it just leaves you with many numbers of most likely uncomfortable questions. But still, for proving that what Madoka Magica criticizes isn't wrong and destructive, you would need a concrete devil's proof. For those who don't know, devil's proof is a case where finding evidence for something will prove the existence of it, but the lack of evidence for it doesn't disprove the case. It might exist, it might not. To prove that the devil exists, you just need to find it and show it to someone. But if you can't, it doesn't necessarily mean the devil doesn't exist. Homura proved that the devil exists, but like all the other things in Madoka Magica, it isn't what we expected. The devil successfully takes God down from her throne, creating a hell which she herself can happily rule over with satisfaction. Not doing this out of greed or pride, but out of an uncontrollable sense of love. Homura's story is Devil's rebellion that succeeded.